Thank you, Mom. Thank you to everyone for coming. Thank you to all our regulars. I want to thank my Aunt Aline from calling in from Virginia. Thank you to my dad for being here in person and to my mom for being on Zoom. Some of my grandmother couldn't make it, but Rosh Hashanah, she got to go to a lot of them. So Shir B'Asher Hashem is the Nishmas Rivka Petzel Bas Yitzchak, and her parents, Hannah Bas Yitzchak, who's Babi Anna, whose Yurtzeit was on Shabbos, and Yitzchak ben Yehuda, whose Yurtzeit is tonight. This year is entitled Purim, Tetzaveh, Purim, and Clothing. Hey, welcome to Mrs. Markson from Boston, calling in for the first time. And I'd like to welcome my Ershval Chavrusa, Elimelech Weisman, Habachar, calling in from Woodmere. In the parsha we read yesterday, Parshas Tetzaveh, we learned about the clothes of the Kohen Gadol and the Kohanim. The high priest and the priest who served in the Mishkan, in the tabernacle. Parshas Tetzaveh, when Meir Shiva, or Moshe of Kansas from the Five Towns, when he would speak about Parshas Tetzaveh, he would branch out and talk about clothing in general from a Torah perspective, and therefore I would like to do the same at this point. I would like to begin with an open question for anyone in the audience. This answer, it has many answers, some of which I've thought of. I'm sure some of you will think of others. But the question is, what is the purpose of clothing? Why do we wear clothing, and what purpose does it serve? So I'll open the floor to anyone who would like to give any thoughts.
Keeps us warm.
Okay, thank you.
It says who we are.
I did think of what my mother said, it says who you are, but right now I'm wearing like a maroon shirt. And tomorrow I could put on a polo shirt. And on Tuesday I could put on a suit and tie. So, did I really change who I am? Or just did my clothes change?
It's more like you wear clothes for certain occasions or for certain roles. So like a bride would wear a bridal gown. You might wear a suit to go to shul, but you wouldn't wear the suit if you were going swimming. So you wear, sometimes the clothes have to do with the role that you're playing at that particular time, or a function of, or they're functional for that particular occasion.
Okay, thank you, Mrs.
If I saw someone like you wearing a yarmulke, Yoni, I would say, regardless of what he's wearing on the outside, he's probably wearing this underneath. And that to me says you're a proud Jewish young man.
Thank you.
Ayil Gibran said, clothes can hide some of what's beautiful, but they can't necessarily hide what is unbeautiful.
Okay. With regards, Mrs. Fistel, to what you were saying earlier, it sounds like what you're saying is more like a person is the same person regardless, but he plays different roles in life, which are machayev, which bring him to wear different clothes for the situation.
Right.
Thank you. So we'll go through a few ideas. So one of the words in Hebrew for clothing is levush, lamed vez shin. The Mefarshim say levush stands for two words, lo bush, which means not being embarrassed. The very first clothes reported in the Torah, the clothes of Adam and Chava, were for that purpose, in order to cover up embarrassment. Mrs. Levine mentioned that keeps a person warm in the wintertime. Clothes can keep a person dry in the rain. Meir Shiva from Muncie, Rav Avram Braun, said that people make judgments on a person based on what that person is wearing. The way a person presents himself in clothing is often how they're judged, to some extent, by people who don't have an existing relationship with them. In addition to these practical ways, the Mefarshim say that there's a significance to clothes. My Rav, who used to be the Rav of Eitz Chaim, Rabbi Nissen Dov Miller, he said that clothes bring out the inner chashivas, the inner value that a person has within himself. One of my Rebbeim, Rabbi Moshe Miller, from the Five Towns, spoke about the concept of chashivas be'etzem, a feeling like each of us as being a Jewish person is a son or daughter of Hashem, and therefore has inherent personal value. So each person, as a son or daughter of Hashem, has unique personal value. And clothes, Rabbi Nissen Dov Miller is saying, helps bring out that inner value, helps bring that out if a person dresses the right way. Rabbi Nissen Dov Miller said, first a person has to work on the self-feeling of chashivas be'etzem, of feeling like a person is worthwhile not because of any of their deeds, but simply for being a son or daughter of Hashem. And once a person has that, clothes can bring it out. If you're interested more in this topic, Rabbi Twersky brings more of a discussion about this in his Sefer 10 Steps. In Parshas Tetzaveh, Parach Chavches Pasuk Beis, at the beginning of the Parsha, the big day Kohen Gadol, the clothes of the high priest, are known as lekavod ulsifaras. What does this mean? So the Malbim says the first word, lekavod, refers to the chashivas be'etzem, the intrinsic self-honor that the Kohen Gadol has, not because he was appointed as the Kohen Gadol, or even because of his tzidkus, because of his righteousness, but simply because who he is as a Jewish person, as the son of Hashem. Now, the next statement is more reflected in some of what you said earlier. Rabbi Chaim Mintz, Mashgiach of Staten Island, in his Sefer, Ask the Rabbi Too. Those of you who are affiliated with URA may own this Sefer, because URA mailed it out to everyone on their mailing list last year. In the Sefer, Rabbi Mintz said that what we wear reminds us of who we are. So like my mother said, if a Jewish man wears a yarmulke and tzitzis, that serves to remind himself that he's a Jewish person. Certainly it conveys that to other people as well, but the main point Rabbi Mintz is saying is that clothing conveys to a person themselves, clothes conveys to us ourselves, who we really are. That's assuming that we dress in a way of what's called tochel labara, meaning that who we are, we reflect it on the outside. Rabbi Katzstein says that the Yidden in Mitzrayim, when we were enslaved, the Medrash says that we maintained our levush. So Rabbi Katzstein says that means that the values that the Jewish people held on the inside, they reflected it out in their dress. Rabbi Katzstein says, as the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, the reason why he wears each special clothes is to remind himself of his mission of holiness. The 8 begadim, the Kohen Gadol, reminds him of his mission of holiness. My father says that, for example, the clothes or the uniform that a person wears conveys what he's supposed to do. For example, a firefighter wears a special red outfit in order to remind himself that his job while wearing these clothes is to put out fires. And my father says another purpose is that if a person conveys himself a certain way, they show they can be trusted. For example, if a librarian wears a tag with librarian on their chest, it shows the patrons that the librarian can be trusted to deliver the patron library books. Now, in Lumdis, Rabbi Nissen Dov Miller says that the Big Day Kahuna make the Kohen a Kohen for an avoda. Meaning, of course, a Kohen has certain rights just based on his birth, for example, eating truma. But what makes him a Kohen, azai right, in a way that will allow him to permissibly perform the avoda, that the avoda, the service in the Mishkan, in the tabernacle, will be a valid avoda, is that he wore his clothes. That the Kohen Gadol is wearing his 8 clothes, or the Kohen Hedyot, the simple Kohen, is wearing his 4 clothes. Now, I'd like to share a thought on a controversial story in the Torah. In Sefer Bereshis, in Parshas Vayeshev, Yaakov gives Yosef, in Parshas Vayeshev, Yaakov Avinu gives his son Yosef a special coat, to Sonis Pasin. And many of the Mefarshim and many people who read the Chumash are very bothered why Yaakov gave Yosef a special coat. And there are many explanations that are given, but the explanation I would like to offer, based on what we've just said, is that Yaakov gave Yosef this special coat to remind Yosef of his mission. Rashi in Parshas Vayeshev says that Yosef was the main progenitor, the main carrier on of his father Yaakov's lineage in Torah. So therefore, I believe Yaakov gave Yosef this special coat in order to remind Yosef that he has this special mission above that of his brothers to carry on Yaakov's lineage in Torah. And I actually saw one of the Sfarim the Shari Aaron brings, called Midrashi Torah, brings a shot like this. So this is sourced in the Sfarim. Rabbi Braun says over from the Shloah Kodesh that a person who's wearing respectable clothes will act respectably. If a person himself is wearing respectable clothes, that will have an impact on himself, that he will act in a respectable manner. And the opposite is true as well. If a person dresses in a disheveled manner, then his midos and hanhagos will deteriorate. Similarly, Yesod, we may be familiar with from the Sefer HaChinuch, the Chinuch writes, he actually says this on the mitzvah of Kohen Gadol, he says this many other places as well, the concept of chitzonius me'ora pnimius, that what we do on the outside, our external actions, have an impact on our internal and the way we are knowing and we conduct ourselves based on that. The outer actions have an effect on us. Now we're familiar that high-level officials in government and business, that they tend to dress more formally. Certainly there are exceptions, but on the whole, people who are high up in government and business tend to dress more formally. So Rabbi Min says that since each of us is from the Am HaNivchar, the chosen people, meaning that we have a special role above and beyond the nations of the world, so that makes all of us high-ranking officials in Hashem's corporation, and therefore it behooves us to dress in a respectable manner to befit our important positions in the world rank. Does anyone have any comments on what we've discussed so far?
Like that last analogy.
Good.
Well, it's good for some things that, but sometimes you put on the clothes to, sometimes you put on the clothes to pretend to be a certain way. You may not actually, and you put them on, maybe you start to act that way, maybe not. But there's another thing, that there are clothes that are functional. Like when a fly fisherman has a vest with lots and lots of pockets in them. That's because he has to carry a lot of different things. So that's functional. When a runner wears a particular type of footwear, that's so that they can run faster. When we wear a sun hat, it's protection from the sun, and that's not necessarily trying to show who we are or to change our meters, but it's for a particular function.
What Reba Levine was saying about we wear clothes for warmth. So when we're running, we have to wear clothes, to keep us running fast and to keep the sun off of us. And when we fish, we have to functionally have pockets to keep bait and hooks and whatever we need to accomplish.
Right, or a crossing guard who wears a colorful outfit so that they are seen.
Did anybody mention clothes for modesty?
We'll get to that.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Levine. So the next topic we'll talk about the clothes of the Kohen Gadol and the Kohanim, the high priest and the priest. Rabbi Kassin says that the elegant clothes of the Kohanim, the aesthetically nice clothes, remind the Kohanim before whom they're serving, the fact they're serving in the presence of Hashem. The pasuk in Parachaf Chas pasuk Gimel, at the close of the Kohen Gadol, the word used lekadsho from the word kadosh. So Tosin Kedushin Daf Beis and Beis says kadosh means to designate. So Aaron HaKohen's clothes focus him to perform the avoda, to perform the service l'shem shemayim, for the sake of Hashem. Rabbi Gerko, the Rav of Stoughton, Rabbi Mendel Gerko, he says that the Big Day Kahuna, the clothes of the Kohen Gadol and Kohanim, they give honor to Hashem in the Beis HaMikdash. Just like, for example, the Royal Guard in Great Britain, the clothes they wear give honor to the monarchy, so too the clothes of the Kohanim give honor to Hashem in the Beis HaMikdash. The Orach Chaim HaKadosh says that the Big Day Kohen Gadol, the clothes of the Kohen Gadol, represent the names of Hashem. Rabbi Kassin says the Mishnah in Zvachim lists 6 lishmas in a karban. 6 different intentions that a Kohen has to have when he processes the offering. For example, l'shem Hashem, for the sake of Hashem, and l'shem Bailim, for the sake of the one who's bringing the karban. So Rabbi Kassin says, based on the Ramban, that the Big Day Kahuna, the clothes, keep a Kohen focused on his mission. The Ramban says that the clothes of the Kohanim actually give honor to the Kohanim themselves who are wearing them. The Brisker Rav says on Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim Siman Reish Nun, so you have Kavod Shabbos, he says that Kavod Shabbos is Zehu Kvodo. This means that preparing for Shabbos is an honor for the person. The greatest honor a person could have is that he gets to honor Shabbos. So we can say that here is as well that a Kohen's greatest honor is to be able to perform the avoda, to perform the service. And in this way, the clothes of the Kohanim accord them honor. Now I'd like to tell a story about how clothes remind the person who's wearing it of his mission. This story is told by Rabbi Parrot Scheineman, Dean of Providence Hebrew Day School, saying over from a rabbi in Boston about a bacher in Boston, a young man in Boston. The bacher was going for his driver's licensure exam, and the policeman was in the car testing him. And after the bacher finished his exam, the policeman had the following observation. The policeman said that, "I wear my clothes for 8 hours a day. When I'm wearing the clothes, I'm responsible to uphold the values, rules, and mission of the police department. However, when I take off my police uniform, then I'm free to be noheg and act the way I want. You, Jewish young man, yeshiva bacher, who was dressed in his white shirt and black pants on the licensure exam, the policeman said, you wear your clothes all day, every day. Not just when you're in school, when you're studying." And the police officer understood, and he told the bacher, because your mission, yeshiva bacher, expands beyond the classroom, beyond the base medrash, and into all areas of life. Because the police officer understood that the purpose of the Torah is to affect all of one's areas of life. Does anyone have any comments about the discussion of the Kohanim and Kohen Gadol or this story about the Bachar and the policeman?
I was just thinking about the story and wondering what the parallel is for women who don't dress in black shirts, white shirts, and black pants, or in a suit, or in a hat of some sort, or don't wear talisim outwardly. And the whole concept of sneas or sniyut is something that many religious women take quite seriously. And it's an interesting comment that in a way, based on this story, we as women tend to blend in, perhaps, and look like an average, non-religious, just average person on the street, except for the fact that as women, we're in today's society often dressing far more modestly than the general public around us. And I wonder what the general public makes of that. Do they laugh at it? Do they hold it in as high esteem as this policeman did? Just a thought, question.
Thank you, Mrs. Markson. I think as you mentioned yourself, especially in the summertime, if a Jewish woman dresses according to the halachos of tznius, that's very nicker, it's very recognizable that she's a Jewish woman. Second off, the colors that one wears, like we'll speak about a little bit later, but wearing tznius colors, not wearing very bright or bold or attractive colors that catch the eye, wearing more colors that are within the norm, are certainly is another way that's nicker, that's recognizable in a person, a Jewish woman. But third is another comment, which is that generally the clothes we wear is between, the main thing is between us and Hashem, and we're not really dressing to impress the other people. Like for
Yoni, I have two comments. First of all, I didn't know, maybe it's different in Boston because I did my driving test and everything in New Jersey, but there was never a policeman. It was always just somebody from the motor vehicle bureau, and it wasn't a policeman. That's just the first comment. But the second one is that in addition to the Kohen Gadol's clothing reminding him of who he is, remember there's bells on the bottom of his thing, and they actually tinkle and ring, and I think that that's also a practical thing so that people outside, when he goes into the bedroom, when he goes into the tabernacle and he comes out, they can hear him because of bells on the bottom of his garment.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Vassell. Mrs. Markson, just to go back to your comment, just to illustrate the point that we don't dress to impress the general public, Marishi Rabbi Canton says that for a bachar to wear his hat on the street is not to impress the public at large and to show how formally we dress. It's for a bachar to maintain his personal sense of feeling like he has a mission. So the same is true for women's clothes as well, that we're not dressing to make people feel like we're especially modest. We're just because of our relationship with Hashem. So therefore,
I was on a cruise, and a strange woman came up to me and said, "It is so nice to see a woman wearing a dress." It was a comment on society, that so many wear slacks. I stood out.
Thank
The
you.
dress stood out.
Mashallah. Very nice. So I'd like to share two main definitions of tznius, and from this, as Hashem will see, that tznius applies equally to men and women. Rabbi Katzin says tznius is that person has a unique relationship with Hashem, which is mechayev, which obligates him to act in a certain way. Tznius is having a unique relationship with Hashem that obligates us to act in a certain way. Rav Victor Miller writes in Chovos Levavos Shar Hachna that tznius is when a person realizes that he is in the presence of Hashem. So from this we can see that tznius dress is dressing in a certain way between oneself and Hashem because of the unique relationship that one has with Hashem. And it just so happens to be that other people view as dress. And the second approach is from Rabbi Naftali Beer, Rosh Kol in Boston, who Baruch Hashem we were zilcha to have at its kind this past Shabbos. Rabbi Beer says that tznius is safeguarding the dignity and nobility that we have inside of ourselves. Tznius is safeguarding the dignity and nobility that we have inside of ourselves. So from this we can see that if a person wears honorable or respectable clothes, then this allows a person to maintain their inner dignity. My Chavrusa, Rabbi Herschel Yaffe of the Five Towns, said that Rabbi Yochanan of the Gemara calls his clothes mechadusai, from the lashon of kavod, honor. So like Rabbi Beer, we can see that clothes allow me to feel honorable about myself. Meaning clothes are not meant to add honor to the person, but they're just meant to protect the honor that a person has within himself, like we spoke about earlier, because one is a son or daughter of Hashem. Now, I'm not going to discuss the halachas of tznius at this time, but I will just share an overall mahalach, an approach from one of my rebbeim, Rabbi Garrett Vitters, from Muncie, which he tells to his wife. If his wife asks him, for example, what standards of tznius dress to maintain, or similar questions, Rabbi Vitters responds and he asks her, what did your Rebbetzin do? Or what would your Rebbetzin think about this? Now, as long as a person has or previously had a Rav or Rebbetzin who they feel has an appropriate perspective as a Ben Torah or Bas Yisrael, as a Erlachei Yer Shemayim, a Torah perspective, then they can think, what would this person do in this situation? What would my Rav or Rebbetzin do? What would my Rosh Shiva do? What would my Rebbe do? Or what would they think about this? So that in general is a good starting point to think about how oneself should act or dress, is to think about how a person they respect would act or dress. Rabbi Kassin, says when a person goes to shul, in general, we should not be looking around at what other people in the tzibur, in the audience, are dressing like. Our purpose of going to shul is to daven, not to look around and see who's wearing well. But I believe one helpful situation, just to tie back what we said earlier, maybe, for example, to a person to look at his Rav and Rebbetzin, for example, on a hot day on Shabbos in the summertime, what types of clothes are they wearing? That might give some perspective for what a person themselves, maybe a starting point for what they would consider having an approach for themselves. Do you have any comments about the topic of tznius? I saw in the Sefer, Rabbi Mintz, he said an idea I hadn't heard before, which is that since our bodies are the ones that perform mitzvahs, like we put tefillin in our arms, we eat the Shabbos shita with our mouths, we walk to shul with our legs. So therefore the body itself deserves honor, and therefore we should clothe it with respect. Now the next topic I'd like to address is wearing of a yarmulke. So we're familiar with the minhag that Jewish men wear a yarmulke on their head. The Mishnah Berurah in Siman Aleph, right at the beginning of Shulchan Aruch, says that yarmulke stands for Yarei Malka, fear of the king. That is why men wear a yarmulke, to give men Yer Shemayim, to give men some sort of an awareness of Hashem. So question is, why do women not wear a yarmulke? So Rabbi Nishan Dov Miller said that the Sfarim say that women have innate Yer Shemayim inside themselves, they don't need a yarmulke to bring it out. Now I'd like to share some perspective on this teaching. One of the first people in the Torah described as having Yer Shemayim were the Miyaldos, the midwives in Egypt. Shifra and Puah, Yocheved and Miriam, Moshe's mother and sister. The Miyaldos disobeyed Paro's orders. Paro ordered the Miyaldos to put to death all Jewish baby boys. The Miyaldos disobeyed Paro. They saved the Jewish babies physically, and they gave them food and drink, and they played with them, they cooed them, as Rashi speaks it out. So, what was the reason that the Miyaldos acted in this way? So, Pasuk in Sefer Shmos, Parak Aleph, Pasuk in Zayin, says that the Miyaldos feared Hashem. Vater Enach Miyaldos es Elokim. Very pashut, clearly outlined in the Chumash. The reason why the Miyaldos acted in this kind and gentle way with the Jewish babies was they had Yer Shemayim. They feared Hashem. And Kazari Bir, he told me on Shabbos that if the Miyaldos were just like nice people, so it's true they would be nice in most situations, but when it came to life and death, they would look out for their own lives. But the Miyaldos, because of their Yer Shemayim, that's where they risked their own lives to save Jewish babies. And the Miyaldos had this Yer Shemayim by dressing as modest Jewish women without any externals. No yarmulke, no other externals as reminders, just because they had this Yer Shemayim innately. And similarly, Jewish women today can access Yer Shemayim, can have awareness of Hashem without externals. All Jewish men rely on the Yer Shemayim of their wives in many areas, but especially to serve kosher food. Men trust their wives that she will ask a shaila, she will ask a question if some sort of suffix, if some sort of doubt comes up, even if she put a lot of effort into the cooking a certain dish. But if there's a question about some sort of mixture of milk and meat, or fish and meat, or a question about a kashrus label, all Jewish men trust their wives that they'll ask such a shaila. The Gemara in Daf Beis and Beis says, "Eid echa nem v'surin," that one witness, one individual, one kosher person is trusted in matters of permitted and prohibited. And Chazal trusts women with regards to permitted and prohibited, certainly with regards to matters in the kitchen. All my Rebbeim have relied on their wives, and this trust stems from the Yer Shemayim that women intrinsically have. That's why all the Jewish men trust their wives, because they know their wives have the intrinsic Yer Shemayim, even without any externals. Do we have any comments about this section about a yarmulke?
Well, how will you define the externals?
Like a yarmulke, a yarmulke is outside of oneself, as opposed to something that's inside of one's neshama.
But married women wear a hat or a wig or a scarf. They do wear a head covering.
Right. The purpose of that is so that people can make brachos in front of them. At least that's one of the purposes. But it's not. A Jewish woman is not wearing a sheitel or techel or a hat in order to remind herself of her mission. Maybe I should take that back. Say the main reason why a Jewish woman wears a yarmulke, where a Jewish woman has the head covering, is so that the erva of her hair should not be seen. But the purpose of it is not to bring out Yer Shemayim. It may give a woman Yer Shemayim if she puts it on, but the purpose is to cover up the erva. The purpose is not to increase Yer Shemayim. Right.
I think what you mean is that men wear ritualized objects. A kippah is something that, Jewish men wear. Well, the Pope, but also Jewish men. And sisters, Jewish men wear. Women wear clothing for modesty and for protection and for other things, but they don't wear a particular religious garment. They don't need a religious garment to remind them of their spirituality, whereas men have religious garments that remind them.
Yeah, I hear it. This is a very fine point. I mean, definitely if a Jewish woman puts on a head covering and feels proud for it that she's a Jewish woman, then ashracha, and more power to you. It's very good. But the technical point is for tznius, not as much to bring out your shemayim. Okay, we'll leave it at that.
There are also, other groups that in which people wear specific head coverings to identify themselves as members of their group. For example, Muslim women often wear a particular kind of head covering, and they're have it very specific so that people can tell that they're part of that group.
Thank you, Harvey. And my father says many men wear a head covering to cover up the bald spot.
The problem with that is that as the bald spot gets bigger, it's harder to attach the head covering.
That's where fedoras come in, and stripers.
So now we'd like to give a few practical points about clothing. In Berachos Shachar, in the blessings we say in the morning, we make the bracha of Malbish Arumin. That Hashem clothes the naked. So in this bracha, we're thanking Hashem for having some clothes, period. We're not mentioning what type, what style. We're just thanking Hashem for having clothes. The Sefer Orchas Tzadikim says a few yesodos, a few ideas for clothing. And this is echoed in the others' farm as well. The Orchas Tzadikim suggests that a person should dress in an average manner for his social class. Meaning, a wealthier person should dress in a mid-range for what wealthier people dress, and a person of less means should dress in a mid-range for the person of less means wear. A person should wear clean clothes, not clothes which embarrass him. Like we spoke about, if it has to do with his personal dignity, that possibly a stain on the clothes could diminish the personal dignity in some way, or the way a person sees himself. Or like Rabbi Braun said, the way other people see him. A person should not dress in a showy way, in a way that turns heads, that people catch his eye. That he will catch people's eyes. And this is also included in hairstyle as part of this, about having an average hairstyle. Rabbi Kasten says that our external clothing should not be impacted at all by the outside world. Certainly like what Mrs. Markson was saying earlier with regards to dressing down or dressing casually or not proper tznius. That's what my chavrusa Mason Krebs suggested. I think maybe Rabbi Katzen maybe also meant a different thing, which is that our clothes should not be impacted by the outside world, and that we should not be trying to keep up with the latest trends and fashions pushed by marketers. And this is true in the non-Jewish world, and I've been told even in the Jewish world there's a push by the marketers to have Jewish people try to keep up with fads and trends. And this is what I believe Rabbi Katzen is saying. Our clothes should not be impacted by the outside world. We should dress in average for our social class ways and not be busy with wide tie and skinny tie, but dress in an average, appropriate way and not trying to keep up with the fads. It's well known in the yeshiva community that young married men in Kollel are willing to drive cars even if the car has incurred some minor scratches or nicks from various fender benders that they may or may not have been at fault for and have gone unrepaired. So I asked a number of the younger light, why would a younger man be willing to drive such a car if he wouldn't wear a shirt that had a scratch or a stain on it? So why would he be willing to drive a car that has nicks and scratches. So Rabbi Batal Reifman, Boston Kollel, he said that really in respect to clothing, a car is more external to a person. A car with nicks and scratches, since it's more external to a person, is not as much of a slight in a person's dignity, maybe not at all, unlike a rip in their clothes. And in David Bibla, my chaver from Worsameach, now of Lakewood, he suggested that a younger man's car should be average for his social class. Meaning, since younger light are generally willing to drive cars with some imperfections, so if a younger man would drive a car that's not in tip-top shape, that would be okay, because for his social class, that is accepted. If it would start to make loud noises or is painted many colors, then maybe he should get a new car. But if it's a few nicks and scratches, that would be okay. Whereas a balabas, a working person, or a member of a shul, it could be for his social class having even a slight dent or bump in his car should be repaired, because most people of his social class drive cars without any bumps or bangs. So therefore, such a person in that social class, a working person perhaps, maybe should repair a dent in his car. Rabbi Vitter says that a person should never be worse than his neighbors. So if his neighbors are act a certain way, he should act that way as well, but he shouldn't have a worse standard. Rabbi Braun told me that a car, like clothes, should not turn heads either way, either because of its amazing beauty or because of how beat up and banged up it is. Neither one is good. A car should be somewhat in the middle. It shouldn't attract any attention. Like, I was working at Beach Street Park in Sharon, and I saw a car with red hubcaps. Now, red hubcaps is something that catches the attention. Red hubcaps not appropriate for is not what I would consider, based on what we said, to be appropriate for an average person. Or I was on the train I think last week, and I saw a man with various colors in his hair. Something that catches the eye is not something what we're looking for.
I was just thinking that fellow with the multicolored hair could hypothetically be a clown or a living.
Okay. Thank you.
Also, repairing a car costs a lot more than washing your shirt. And sometimes it's just a matter of people's priorities. Another reason why people shouldn't have a car that stands out is that that's the first car that's going to be pulled over for speeding, whether it's speeding or not.
Thank you, Harvey. And Shamatim did suggest that to me as well, that it does cost money to fix a car. Now, with regards to, before we begin the segment about Purim, just to conclude the general topic about clothing, like year-round clothing, that ultimately what a person wears with regards to exactly what type or what style is not the most important thing. What's most important is one's Torah and Ma'asim Tovim, one's Torah and mitzvahs. Now, certainly for a woman, a main mitzvah she has to keep is the mitzvah of tznius, so that is part of her Ma'asim Tovim. But as far as exactly what type, what style, what particular, is not the most important thing, but rather one's Torah and good deeds. I want to share the following sharp line from the Satmar Rav of the old Teitelbaum to a certain chassid. A chassid came to his Rebbe, the Satmar Rav, and asked about a certain individual named Mike Tress. Mike was a figure from last century who was prominent in American Jewry. Mike was known for having tremendous avas Yisrael. He was a Jewish person, loved all fellow Jews, and did as much as he can to help fellow Jews. And Mike did not have a beard. So the chassid came to ask his Rebbe, what do you think about Mike Tress? So the Rebbe told his chassid, he said, when Mike comes to Shemayim, they're going to ask him, Yid, "Where's your beard?" And the Satmarav continued, "To you, my chassid, when you come to Shemayim, they're going to ask you, 'Beard, beard, where's your yid?'" So we see from this story a couple things. That one of externals does mean something. Meaning the Satmarav felt Mike Tress is going to have to answer in Shemayim, despite his many good deeds, he's going to have to answer why he didn't have a beard as a Jewish man. But what means much more is living as a Yid. For example, having Avas Yisrael, like Mike Tress did. That's what the Satmarav was giving over to his chassid. That's much more important to live as a Yid than it is whether or not one has a beard. Now, Rabbi Katzin says, everything we've said until now is true, but the following statement has to be a main factor of consideration with what one dresses. With regards to a house, Rabbi Katzin says that the home one lives in needs to be one where the person living there is comfortable and where Hashem is comfortable with the living situation. With regards to what one brings into the house, what one does in the house. And we can suggest the same is true for clothes. That for clothes, a person needs to be comfortable, both in terms of the fit and the style. And also that Hashem has to be comfortable with the clothes that we're wearing. As it befits a son or daughter of Hashem and a member of the chosen nation, a prominent member of Hashem's corporation. Do we have any final comments about clothing before we move on to closing on Purim? Yes, Mom.
I learned about 8 years ago at a talk. It was a young Israel, and the speaker said that some Orthodox clothing comes from the Polish gentry from the 16 or 1700s, and it was adapted by Orthodox Jews to this day. So Rabbi Katzenstein was saying we shouldn't be influenced by marketers, but sometimes we are influenced when we're in the minority, the majority, whatever it may be. And I guess clothes might be the least innocuous, or the least rather than speech or action. So it's very interesting. And at one point we were influenced.
Again, the two things we said not to emulate about the secular culture and clothing is dressing in a low-class way or keeping up with fads and fashions. But to emulate respectable actions of the non-Jewish world is acceptable.
Oh, okay. Good to know.
Do you have any other comments?
To pick up on what your mom said, it's true that if people are dressed like 21st century Americans, but theistic, where the shoulders are covered, there's women are their knees are covered, their elbows are covered, whatever, it doesn't stand out as much as a man who's dressed like 18th century Polish nobility walking down the street. All the heads are going to turn to that. And so that's certainly not dressing like the people that you're living around. If you've got this big fur strimal and this long black coat and a belt and a beard that's straggly all over the place, and your pants tucked in with the white socks sticking up, that's not typical for somebody walking down the street of Sharon. All the heads are going to turn if somebody's dressed like that.
Walk down the street in Sharon, they're usually in places where everybody else dresses the same.
Right, but if you're living in Sharon, that wouldn't be the appropriate way of dressing, Maz.
Okay, so Hasidim have a different perspective on dress, so I'm not prepared to address the Hasidic perspective. But the way Litvaks dress, the way Ashkenazim dress, is we wear, for men, we wear a suit, tie, which is a respectable way that respectful people of America dress, and the fact we wear a black hat, or any hat, we're all familiar. All Americans used to wear a hat. Look at the old baseball pictures, 1920s, in stadiums, they all wore a hat. Since John F. Kennedy took off his hat and decreased the status of the American people, but we still wear a hat. Now I'd like to talk about the final segment, clothing on Purim. The question that's appropriate to ask ourselves this week is, how should we dress on Purim? The Ramah in Shulchan Aruch brings two opposite minhagim. First one is Siman Tafresh Sadi Hesef Beis, the Maharil's meaning of dressing in Shabbos and Yontif clothing on Purim. That's meaning brought in Ramah to wear Shabbos and Yontif clothing on Purim. Rabbi Zalman Leff, the Boston Moshe Kollel, says this is for the Kedush L'Hayom, for the sanctity of the day of Purim, or to allow us to put us in the mood to be receptive for Kedusha on Purim. The second meaning in Siman Tafresh Tzadi Vav Siman Ches, brought in the Ramah, is to wear masks and other silly forms of clothing. So how do we reconcile this steer in the Ramah? On one hand, the Ramah says we should wear Shabbos clothes, and on the other hand, the Ramah says we should wear masks and silly form of clothing.
How about like the night of you wear one way and the day of you wear the other way?
So what my mom is saying is essentially what many people do. So first off, Rabbi Leff says that either approach is valid. Meaning, if you want, you could wear Shabbos clothes. If you want, you could wear masks or silly forms of clothing. Either approach is valid. And in our Purim experiences, surely we've seen people doing both. People wearing Shabbos clothes and people wearing costumes. And some people split up Purim different ways. Like in my yeshiva, many people do the following schedule. They would come to the Megillah reading Thursday night. For example, this year, Thursday night, they would wear Shabbos clothes. Then for the Masiba, the party at night, they would dress in a costume. Then Friday morning for Megillah reading, Shachas and Megillah reading, they would wear Shabbos clothes. And then for the rest of the day, for collecting for tzedakah, giving Mishloach Manos, Sudash Purim, and the Masiba, they would wear a costume. And Rabbi Shmuel Simcha Shef, Boston Kollel, says this was the minhag in Long Beach as well. Rabbi Leff said, similar to what we were saying earlier, that on Purim, ultimately, a person needs to wear something that they themselves feel comfortable in. So Rabbi Leff said, if a person feels more comfortable wearing Shabbos clothes, he can wear Shabbos clothes. If he feels more comfortable wearing a costume, he can wear a costume. A person should not try to force either one if he doesn't feel comfortable. But I believe we can see from this Ramah, that a person's clothes should not be the same as a weekday. The way a person dresses on Purim should not be the same as a weekday. It should either be more festive or more sympathetic, more lighthearted. Now to conclude, Rabbi Catherine has a few suggestions for those who are interested in dressing in costume on Purim. What is the appropriate costume? So Rabbi Katzen says that an ideal costume is to dress up as someone that one wants to emulate. For example, if a male wants to emulate Mordechai Tzaddik, he can dress as Mordechai Tzaddik. If a woman wants to emulate Esther Hamalka, like my mother, she can dress up as Esther Hamalka. Some Litvaks dress up as Hasidim if they respect Hasidim. That's the ideal costume, something that a person dresses in that they want to aspire towards becoming. Now, more Parv costumes are also acceptable. For example, if a person dresses up as a banana, or a teddy bear, or a big blow-up man, that costume is acceptable. But the costumes that should be avoided is dressing up as someone who has negative needles. For example, dressing up as an arrogant politician, or dressing up as a movie star who's all about externals and is the total opposite of everything we've had in this year. Dressing up as a coarse athlete who was rude to the people in his orbit. Dressing up as a bandit, Haman, Esav. All this should be avoided, because the Catholic says if a person dresses in one of these ways, then that can lead to emulating their values. And Rabbi Nissim Miller told me that if a person's costume is appropriate for tefillah, then they are allowed to daven in such a costume. Do we have any comments about the section about Purim?
Yeah, I was just taking notes. Could you repeat what Rabbi Miller said?
That if a person's costume is appropriate for tefillah, even if it's different than what they usually wear, they are allowed to daven in it. Maybe Zochah to be proud of our Jewish clothing, like Mordechai HaTzadik was in Perek Tes Pasuk Aleph of Megillah, when the Gra says, the Vilna Gaon says, Mordechai left. I believe this is Perek Tes Pasuk Tes Vav. When Mordechai HaTzadik was leaving the king's palace wearing fine clothes, the Gra says, this is a reference to Talis and Tefillin, Mordechai Yatsa Milifnei HaMelech. And Mordechai left from the king's palace. He was wearing proudly his talis and tefillin. So may we be proud of our Jewish clothing, like Mordechai Tzaddik was when he walked out in talis and tefillin. I'll just sing a brief song to these words. Mordechai yatsa milifnei hamelech Belvush Malchus Vateresav Umardachai Yatsa Nilifnei HaMelech Belvush Malchus Vateresav Ay, ay, ay Umardachai Yatsa Nilifnei HaMelech Belvush Malchus Vateresav Ay, ay, ay Mordechai Yatsa Milifnei HaMelech Bilvush Malchus Vateresav Na 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 na. A Freilich and Purim, Mishnechus Adar Marvin Simcha, and thank you for coming.